Hello, this is Scary Scars Shared, in which real project managers share what they have learned from their most challenging project management experiences with me, Ken Burrell from the PMO Professionals. If PMO is your thing, you might want to subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell to be notified of new content. Today I'm joined by David Mitchell. David, I'd like you to start, if you could, by giving us an introduction to your background and how you got into project management.
Yeah, I've been working in the area of project management for nearly 23 years now. I've been working setting up large, complex PMOs for transformation programs. I'm almost always in the healthcare sector. I've also worked a number of times as a project manager and originally started back in the beginning as a scheduler and a planner, and I really like that logic to it. So been around a while and really enjoyed it.
So thinking back over your project management career, can you give us an example of a scar, so something that went wrong on a project that you were managing and what you learned from it?
Yeah, I think we all learn by our mistakes. There's one that's always stayed with me, and it's just like a really nice summary about a couple of project management principles that actually work or don't work. So I did some contracting in banking for a while. This one's about 17 years old, so it goes back a while. I was running a PMO in a bank and I was really enjoying it, and I got kind of tapped on the shoulder. There's a project that we want you to run. My boss at the time was amazing. There's a chap called Roger. If you see this, Roger, thank you for all your help. But here's a project that we want you to take care of. The kick-off meeting's tomorrow. Okay, what's the project about? And it's really around the operating procedures for a bank were stored on this system and shared with its network. The system was flaky, to say the least, and it was coming the end of its warranty. I think the warranty ended in November, and this was sort of late August. And if it runs out of warranty, it became a compliance issue. So it was a must-do project, which had been delayed. So the next day is the big kick-off meeting. I knew there was a little bit of friction between the two groups. That I walked in as what was the business project manager, and you had the business on one side of the desks, and you had tech on the other, and there was a difficult atmosphere. It was very uncomfortable. Nobody had said anything, and everyone kind of looked at each other, and you knew that people were getting ready to start on each other if they've been in those situations. So we got into the hi, I am kind of thing around the desk, and then they started to take little chunks out of each other, and they obviously the business and the tech guys were building up, and then the door swang open. And in walked this vice president of tech from the bank, and sort of storms in to take control of what was going on. I was like, oh my God. Walks up to the whiteboard with a pen, turns around and said, right, when do we have to deliver this? November. Okay, let's work backwards. So we'll do like 6 weeks of testing, and then we'll do a build, and the build will probably be 4 weeks, and that will fit, and there's some contingency in it. Great, that's what we're going to do. No input from anybody. And then the business lead I was working with chips up, we're going to need a lot longer than that for testing. And then we had a supplier who was doing the build who went, well, we're going to need an awful lot longer than that for the build. So we kind of squiggled the lines around a bit and went, right, that's what we're going to do. And then flounced out.
Right. That's one way to draw up a plan.
Yeah, and it was, okay. Awkward silence. Everyone kind of looked at their feet and then stumbled out the room. Right. The guy who was mentoring me at the time, who I'd only just met, took me down to see our senior vice president and went, right, this is the impossible project. It can't be done. We're going to need your help. To which he replied, that's tech's problem. So we meant for the rest of the project, I was kind of, in between two sides. I felt like a UN sort of peacekeeper or something most of the time. So I've seen it happen in lots of other projects as well, where people plan backwards and it fails, or it creates a lot of strain and a lot of pressure because you're trying to keep something very artificial. So the learning and how we fixed it, if I go on to that, was that one group and then the other group, and we planned forward. And when we planned forward, we found that the development time was going to take probably 6 weeks, and the developer was on holiday, and you needed this one guy, as you always do in the world of development, and he was on holiday and he wouldn't be around for 2 weeks. Okay. And then when you ran this piece of software, it was going to take a month to move this data over. Okay, so I was like, oh God. So timeline's pretty much blown. And then when you spoke to the business unit to do the testing, they were saying probably 4 months. I was like, okay, this is bad. But because we're drawing it out, we could understand what the timeline was and what the thinking was behind it. So we went back and went, okay, we have to accept that this developer won't be there. The cutover of the data, we can test whilst we're doing that after the first week. So it's not as bad as we thought. And then we looked at the testing time. And when you spoke to them, it's because their resources weren't available. So what testing do you really need to do? You need to look at one screen and another. Well, we'll get some contractors in, some temps in to do that. Okay. Fine. And then even when we looked at that, we still blew the timeline by about a month to 6 weeks. So what we've obviously done parallel running, bring more resources in, and then we kind of looked at the scope and we said, well, there's all the data items of the same value. And it was like, oh, No, they're not. Some of them are regulatory and must-dos, and some of them are, it was fish and chips in the menu last Friday, and it's okay. So we kind of then sort of prioritise that and then cut the scope and worked our way through it. So it was a really good how to actually manage a project plan correctly and don't plan backwards, plan it forwards, then work through what the constraints are and what the problems are. And yeah, we brought it in on time.
So just to recap then, you were in a situation where someone had imposed a plan that was completely unachievable but aimed at the drop dead date without any contribution from the team. But by working with the team and planning forwards, you're able to identify each constraint and then tackle it to bring it in by the due date. So what advice would you give to other project managers who might find themselves in a situation similar to that, or to avoid getting into that sort of situation in the first place?
I think one of the most basic and boring things is you go into the meetings, make sure you've got your relationship straight, and make sure you have an agenda of what you want to do and a process that you're going to follow. All those things that good project managers do, as opposed to being railroaded by very senior people. That's always going to be a tricky one. So I think that's a lot of skills got to go into that, and you've got to explain the process you're following to them, or have one. Yeah, that still happens to me today, to be holding my hands up.
Anything else?
Yeah, sometimes as a project manager, you've got to keep the parties apart, and you've got to be the middleman. Sometimes it's better just to keep them apart and you know, be a negotiator.
Thanks, David, for sharing that with us. Having heard about David's experiences, what can you learn from it? What will you do differently in your projects as a result? If you enjoyed this interview, you might want to consider subscribing. Remember to hit the bell so that you get notified of new content. If you'd like to receive free PMO hints and tips, sign up to our semi-regular newsletter. The links are in the episode notes. Oh, and if you'd like to share one of your scars, then get in touch. In the meantime, until the next time, thanks for listening.